This is Pod Populi.
Podcast for the people.
The Great Love Debate. It's the Great Love Debate.
The Great Love Debate. It's the Great Love Debate.
Hi again, everyone. It's Brian Howie. Welcome to The Great Love Debate, the world's #1 dating and relationship podcast. Since 2015, as you guys probably know, or you heard at the top of this, I'm a partner in a media and a podcasting production company called Pod Populi, Podcasts for the People. And not only do we have a bunch of brick and mortar style retail locations where we create and record podcasts, we also produce dozens of podcasts for people literally all over the world. And one of the fundamental tenets of podcasting that you've heard me say around here is that they should be evergreen, that you should reference time or date or weather or particular event in sort of a nebulous way that somebody could be listening to it at any point and it's still reasonably relevant. You don't want the material to be dated or completely out of touch by the time the listener gets around to it, because sometimes people listen to it right away and sometimes people discover your podcast or get around to listening to it a year down the road. So that being said, the vast majority of listeners to this podcast, according to the data, according to the stats I get fed to me, listen within 48 hours of it dropping, which I like. We thank you very much for that. It means you're very anticipatory. It means you're excited. It's like Christmas Eve. You can't wait to open the Great Love Debate package each week. So I appreciate that. But every once in a while, we throw out some quasi time-specific content because it's both relevant to what we're talking about here in the big picture, and it's also important. And I think when we do that on rare occasion, I think it can still be evergreen, even maybe if it's in the form of a time capsule. So somebody could crack this open in 200 years and be like, oh, that's what they were talking about. A little slice of time back then. So usually when we get towards the end of each year, and for those of you listening in July 2023, we are recording this towards the end of the year 2021. So we're approaching a new year. And at the end of each year, normally we do a couple of episodes that are always a couple of our most popular. We first put out the top 10 cities in America in which to find love. It's very hopeful. And then we usually follow that up a couple weeks later with the top 10 worst cities in America to date. And the latter always generates way more buzz than the former because misery loves company, and there's a whole lot of misery in the dating world, like it or not. Misery sometimes drives this podcast, but people like to hear the worst. They hope their city's on the worst, and so we do get a lot of attention when we do that. But not here, not in our world, not today. We don't want this to be part of that miserable world. It's delightful here in our GLD year wrapping up snow globe. So we're not going to release those lists quite yet, or at least not right now. And the reasons for that are actually pretty simple. Because of the logistics and other assorted matters, we just simply didn't visit as many cities this year. We just didn't. I personally traveled a bunch. I traveled more this year than just about any other year. But I mostly did that for the aforementioned podcasting business. I didn't entirely travel as much for Great Love Debate business. And when we put out the list of the best and the worst, we want to be able to honestly assess the situation, which means that we want to have spent a reasonable amount of time in each market and to talk to people and to hear from people and to really dive into the deep dating muck rather than just pull names out of a hat and say like, oh, these 10 cities sound good or they're what we learned last year or the year before. These lists are very fluid. We've had some cities on the list, on the bad list that ended up on the good list, and on the good list that ended up in the bad list. The dating landscape is fairly fluid in a lot of these places, and we really do believe in these lists. There's no election fraud or ballot fixing in our world. We play it straight, and we feel that our lists are the the gold standard of the American dating landscape. I'm going to say it just like that. The Great Love Debate is the gold standard of the American dating landscape. So somebody asked me once why we didn't do a global list, because we do this show in a lot of places all around the world. But even though we do that, we're still missing a bunch of cities and countries. So it would be incomplete and inaccurate if we only focused on the places where I have personally been that year. There's only so many places I can go. And if we did that kind of list, I've been to Bangkok quite a few times, and you can find many, many things in Bangkok, but I'm not sure love is one of them, if you know what I mean. But this last year, these last 2 years, they were crucial when it comes to all of this stuff. And I think I referenced this recently, that I felt this way, or maybe I did it on an interview somewhere, but that I think maybe these were the two most important years we have had in the last decade or two when it comes to love and dating and relationships. So you might be like, what? How can you say that? I was stuck in my 300 square foot apartment with 2 roommates for 2 years and I never got out. Or you might be like, my favorite bar closed down, or we couldn't leave the house, or how can you say it's been 2 important years? I think those things matter. And I think what you went through and the things that you did not have, I think all those things are relevant, and they're going to get into what I want to get into here. You know, high pressure systems do bring bright sunny skies. And the clouds are finally parting, despite the endless hysteria that you see on CNN. Turn it off. Just tune it out, because hysteria drives ratings. And so the more hysteria there is, the more ratings there are. But you got to make your own decisions with your own information. And I like to wrap things up in a nice, neat bow. And so I do think it's time for that, because we are moving towards the end of something. So I think we need to look back so we can, in a good way, move ahead. We went through a lot of shit collectively, all of us, no matter where you were dealing with the same shit as everybody else. Some of us grew closer because of it. Some of you got divorced because of it. Many, many of you broke up because of it. Some of you got back together because of it. But all of us, I think, no matter what your situation was or is, you reflected and you rethought, and hopefully you reimagined where we are and who we were or were not with, and what we wanted things to look like in the future. So, long-winded intro. Today, I want to get into the lessons that we have learned, because I think they're important and they're definitely relevant. They matter. And I think if we learn from them, we're all going to be much, much better off in the weeks and the month and the years and the life and the loves that lie ahead. So I do want to get into all of that today. And we do have to take a quick break, because I got to build that heightened anticipation after that big build up. But we shall return and dive deeply into that right after this. And we are back. So, what are the lessons we've learned in 20 and 21 that will bode well for the ghosts of relationships' future? So I want to start with the most important one. And the most important one is this. So I will begin here. We absolutely do, capital D, capital O, need each other. That's the most important thing that we learned. Many, many of you back in the old days of 2019, we were probably frustrated after one too many bad dates or a connection that ended up going absolutely nowhere. And you thought, you know what? Fuck it. I have my wine and I have my dog and I have some really close friends and I really like Netflix, and maybe I don't need a special someone in my life or on my couch or in my bed. And you know what this last 2 years taught us? You do. We do. We all do. We are just not wired to go it alone. And no matter what you think of the way things were, being alone is not as good. It will never be as good. And giving us a small taste of what that looked like, or a big taste of what that looked like over the last couple of years, well, you know what? Welcome back. We missed you. We missed each other. Is it all fun and games in the deep end of the dating pool? It is not. But when it's good, and it really can be and should be good, and you do know that, and I think that's why a lot of you are listening, when it's good, it's better than anything. And I think you realize that now. You miss the good times, the upside of dating, the positive of being in a good relationship. You miss that during the last 2 years far more than you thought about the bad times. And a lot of times in the course of our day, we think about the negative. We think about the bad times. But I think in the last 2 years, when you began to think about relationships and what you wanted, I think for the first time in a long time, you thought about the good times. And the flipping around of that pessimistic mindset, that's the best thing that could have happened to you and to us, all of us. And on that note, the next thing that it taught us is that technology is not a substitute. A Zoom call is not as good. Texting is insufficient. Your toys, sexual or video or otherwise, they are absolutely not as satisfying. I've heard people say, COVID lockdowns taught us to communicate in new ways again. No, they didn't. They didn't teach us that. They taught us that the way we communicated before, that was pretty fucking good. The wink, the nod, the glance, the hello, the face-to-face, me and you, the high five, the human interaction, the banter, the laughs, the awkward pauses, when it's just the two of you. You absolutely miss that, and you absolutely need that, and we absolutely finally know that now. You started to work at home. Many of you still work at home. And some of you like not having to shower or fix your hair, not having to wear pants. And yeah, sometimes it's good not to wear pants, but not at work. But you liked that, and you liked not having to get up that extra hour to commute. But I don't think it's worth the trade-off for what you no longer have. So say what you want about strict new HR rules and how the times have changed in the 2 years prior to these 2 years. But the workplace was still the best place to meet people. And whether or not you work at a company that frowns on flirtation in the copy room, or they forbid that kind of banter at the coffee machine, there was still a possibility of something. Whether it be with somebody literally in the next cubicle over, or whether the drinks at the local bar after work, because you guys all went out together, simply led to meeting someone new. Because after work drinks and cheap mozzarella sticks at happy hour and 10-cent wings at the place next, 10-cent winks. I'm going to sell those. I'm going to sell 10-cent winks. 10-cent wings at the place next door to your office building. Those things were important because those things actually did lead somewhere. And maybe we don't meet people whose work as much. We don't. But we definitely still meet people from work. You met them at a conference, or you met them in a meeting, or you met them in a sales appointment or on a project. And absolutely, when all that stuff was going on, you were connecting, and through connection comes chemistry, face to face, in the same room, in person. So maybe you loved and you still love the comfy sweats that you like to sit around and create your PowerPoints in. It's not as good. It's not. It's not as good as Thursday night at 6:15 when you had a chance to do something different, or meet someone different, or see someone a different way that you met via work. You spend 50 to 60 hours a week with these people. That's still going to be your best chance to meet someone, or through their network or someone they know. That is a giant net that you're casting out through your workplace. So, when you do go back